Born into America's most storied dynasty, Arianna Rockefeller has spent 4 decades redefining what it means to carry the Rockefeller name. In this exclusive 30-minute profile, we trace the old money heiress from her thunder-cracked birth in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to Ivy League classrooms, United Nations corridors, Fashion Week runways, and international show-jumping arenas. Discover how this millennial entrepreneur fuses timeless heritage with modern audacity, launching sustainable luxury handbags, pausing production for animal welfare reforms, dating outspoken NBA activist Enes Kanter Freedom, and steering multi-million-dollar climate grants through the David Rockefeller Fund. Whether you're obsessed with legacy families, conscious fashion, or female founders breaking the gilded mold, this video delivers insider detail, archival photos, and expert commentary you won't find on Wikipedia. Click play to see how Arianna Rockefeller turns an empire's past into a blueprint for ethical influence today, and hit subscribe for more deep dive narratives on icons who changed the rules of power. Arianna Rockefeller was born 26 May 1982 in Cambridge. Massachusetts inhaled her first breath, a meteorological drumroll that seemed to announce a future defined by equal parts inheritance and disruption. 20 minutes later, a Volvo station wagon, chosen deliberately over any chauffeured sedan, ferried mother and newborn past Harvard Yard's red brick spires toward a cedar-scented townhouse where oil portraits of Titanic ancestors watched from gilt frames. Those portraits had presided over decisions that launched universities, marshaled capital markets, even nudged geopolitics. Now they greeted an infant already charged, whether she wanted it or not, with curating that legacy for a century still unwritten. At 3, she toddled across parquet floors, counting her steps aloud, her voice bouncing off bookcases stuffed with dog-eared biographies of abolitionists, impressionist catalogs, and bound ledgers of the Rockefeller Foundation's earliest grants. Each evening, her father knelt beside her miniature desk, sliding 3 coins across the surface: spend, save, give. Arianna's fingers, still sticky with finger paint, learned to allocate pennies before she could properly braid her hair. When she asked why giving came last instead of first, David Jr. smiled. Because you need to know what you have before deciding what others need. The exercise was simple, the lesson profound, and every week the amounts grew, first pennies, then quarters, eventually paper bills, tucked into envelopes marked conservation and arts. Sunday mornings began with family bicycle rides along the Charles River. Riders pedaled past joggers, unaware they were waving to the custodians of Standard Oil's aftershocks. Susan Cohn Rockefeller carried granola bars wrapped in reusable beeswax while reciting trivia about bee colony collapse, turning casual snacks into micro-lectures on ecological interdependence. Arianna listened wide-eyed, handlebars wobbling each time she tried to picture entire orchards disappearing for lack of pollinators. The city around her pulsed with intellectual caffeine. Nobel laureates lined up for lattes, grad students debated Foucault under elms, and Arianna inhaled it all like secondhand smoke. By 10, she could explain the greenhouse effect and quote Jane Austen in the same breath, convinced both were essential tools for survival at the next family reunion. Her formal education began at the Ethel Walker School for Girls, whose iron gates looked less like security and more like punctuation, an exclamation mark announcing the conviction that women belonged at the helm of everything. Dorm C smelled of lavender sachets and whiteboard markers. Arianna's roommates included a DuPont descendant who binge-watched Japanese anime and an Aster Scion obsessed with astrophotography. Lights Out never stuck. After faculty rounds, flashlights flicked on beneath quilts as the girls swapped investment portfolio gossip with equal parts speculation on upcoming prom playlists. Arianna, already attuned to risk management, parlayed these after-hour sessions into informal think tanks. If someone needed campaign slogans for class president, she obliged. If another struggled with calculus, she diagrammed the slope of supply and demand alongside parabolic curves. Horses entered the frame like inevitable plot devices. The first gelding Arianna rode was named Lionel, a chestnut with a habit of refusing tiny cross rails but sailing over oxers as if mocking her sense of proportion. Mornings in the barn began at 5. She mucked stalls, curried coats until chestnuts shone like pennies, and practiced balancing a glass of water on her helmet brim while trotting, her trainer's trick for perfect posture. Show weekend road trips rolled out before dawn. Arianna, hair still damp from a rushed braid, revised geometry proofs in the back seat between bouts of nervous daydreaming. Each ribbon pinned to her blazer pocket read less like trophy bragging and more like confirmation that precision, when fused with intuition, could carry a 1,000-pound animal clean over an obstacle. Summers unfolded in layered time zones. One year, she interned at the Maine Coast Heritage Trust, kayaking along sinewy bays to document erosion. The next, she shadowed marine biologists tagging bluefin tuna off Cape Cod. Evenings returned her to dinner tables where philanthropic titans debated new grantees between spoonfuls of clam chowder. Arianna sat silently until dessert, when she'd politely challenge a cousin's skepticism about funding contemporary dance or propose doubling seed money for a community-run solar farm. David Jr. encouraged such dissent, reminding the table that dynasties stagnate when conversation becomes monologue. Acceptance to Columbia University arrived with little surprise, but immense possibility. Moving-in day saw Arianna lugging crates of dog-eared paperbacks ahead of a single Louis Vuitton steamer trunk. Vintage, thrift-scored, monogrammed, discreetly covered by a canvas sleeve. Her first semester schedule read like a reconnaissance blueprint: mornings in political theory seminars parsing Rousseau's social contract, afternoons in modern art survey classes, wandering MoMA's white cubes. Evenings she zipped crosstown on her beat-up bicycle to volunteer at God's Love We Deliver, slicing onions until her eyes burned, a humbling antidote to Ivy League insulation. She shared a dorm floor with future hedge fund architects, digital rights activists, and a computer science prodigy who would later build the encryption software Arianna uses to protect artisan supply chains. When classmates discovered her last name, conversations often grew awestruck or awkward. She diffused the tension by treating her lineage like a trivia footnote. Yes, those Rockefellers. Now about that Kantian categorical imperative. Junior year, she took a semester abroad meant to be in Paris, but quickly morphed into something more nomadic. A cheap rail pass and insatiable curiosity pushed her beyond the Seine to Lisbon murals, Berlin techno basements, Krakow synagogues, and a remote Finnish design co-op where she learned how reindeer leather can be tanned with willow bark. She kept a sketchbook bursting with color swatches, saddle-stitched diagrams, and overheard idioms. Raw data for an entrepreneurial hunch she could feel pulsing beneath coursework. On sleepless train rides, she drafted a manifesto. Heritage is a toolkit, not a cage. Returning to Columbia, she posted the line on her dorm door: half dare, half reminder. Graduation day erupted under an April sun that set low plaza fountains sparkling like celebratory champagne. The political science diploma in her hand represented mastery of institutions. The art history concentration tucked in the margins signaled loyalty to imagination. Yet instead of sliding directly into the Rockefeller philanthropic machine, Arianna booked a one-way ticket to Kigali to shadow UN peacebuilding officers in Rwanda. She rented a tiny apartment with erratic electricity, subsisted on passion fruit smoothies, and spent evenings decoding acronyms that swirl through diplomatic briefings like encrypted weather patterns. Colleagues noticed her rare skill, listening. She'd linger after closed-door sessions, notebook balanced on her knee, absorbing local staff's unfiltered critiques of Western aid. In those moments, she understood that her family's capital, while vast, was inert without precision and humility. Her UN badge next stamped her into Geneva, then Istanbul, then Nairobi's Gigiri, compound where monkeys regularly snatch pastries from outdoor cafe tables. Each city added thickness to her accent, now an undefinable lilt of global shorthand. She learned that influence travels farther when disguised as service, that power is a solvent capable of dissolving both bureaucracy and integrity, depending on dosage. By 26, she was fluent in budget cycle jargon and spreadsheets, mapping public health interventions. Yet something tugged at her from the creative half of her brain like a horse pawing the stall door before dawn. That tug manifested in 2014 within a repurposed Dumbo warehouse overlooking the East River. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and one folding table covered in leather swatches signaled the birth of Arianna Rockefeller, the label. She hired a pattern maker whose grandparents stitched for Halston and a marketing intern from Parsons, who moonlighted as a DJ. Their shared thesis: merge equestrian elegance with city grit. The first collection featured structured jackets punctuated by horn buttons, silk scarves printed with stylized jumping courses, and handbags whose D-ring hardware nodded to snaffle bits without screaming Pony Club. Critics expecting derivative prep cliches instead found thoroughly modern classicism. Vogue.com called it heritage under a hacker spotlight. Orders trickled, then poured, enough to expand production into a solar-powered Brooklyn facility employing union craftsmen paid living wages, a non-negotiable clause Arianna stapled to every contract. 2 years later, designer Bassam Ali wandered into her studio carrying a sample of rose-tinted ostrich hides and an idea for a fold-over tote referencing Arabian saddlebags. Their conversation ricocheted from Mesopotamian trade routes to Bauhaus color theory before landing on collaboration. The resulting capsule sold out within 8 hours of its online release, each piece tagged with near-field communication chips, revealing the entire supply chain story when scanned by smartphone. Fashion Press declared Arianna a quiet revolutionary, though she insisted transparency should be as standard as care labels. Between fittings and fabric mill visits, Arianna kept one boot firmly planted in show-jumping arenas. She upgraded from Lionel to Galileo, a dark bay Dutch warm blood with a mischievous tail flick. Together they toured circuits from Wellington to Wiesbaden. Competition mornings smelled of liniment and fresh-cut grass. Nights ended with barn aisles lit by iPhone glow as she FaceTimed artisans about zipper delays on next season's satchels. Rival writers sometimes joked that Arianna was drafting marketing copy between fences, a rumor only partly exaggerated. A double clear round at the Hampton Classic landed her on SportsCenter's late-night slot, the commentator marveling at that Rockefeller girl who cleared 1.60 meters like she was popping over a puddle. Art remained her oxygen. Weekends unattached to horse shows found her drifting through galleries in Chelsea, scribbling notes about negative space or color saturation. She befriended curators who texted her after hours images of under-the-radar painters from Lagos, Buenos Aires, Seoul. These relationships fed back into design inspiration and philanthropy alike. When a young Cuban sculptor needed studio rent, Arianna bought 3 pieces at asking price and arranged a museum residency stipend funded quietly through the David Rockefeller Fund. She considered it venture capital for cultural ecosystems. Amid bullet train schedules, romance threaded itself, first serenely, then unpredictably. In 2005, at a rooftop benefit whose cocktails involved edible orchids, she met Matthew Buckland, a Florida tech entrepreneur whose startup translated dolphin clicks into datasets. Their connection sparked over mutual amusement at the event's dress code, tropical black tie. Friends describe Matthew as part surfer, part software savant. Arianna adored the way his vernacular zigzagged from neural nets to Nietzsche. They married on a misty July morning along Maine's rocky coastline, exchanging vows inside a cedar chapel with no photographer present beyond a Polaroid-toting cousin. Marriage lengthened Arianna's sense of possibility, but eventually underscored divergent trajectories. By 2019, the pair announced an amicable divorce, citing growth in parallel directions. Tabloids gorged on speculation, but Arianna refused to monetize heartbreak with interviews, preferring silence and another ribbon pinned beside Galileo's bridal that season. Only months later, headlines erupted anew when paparazzi captured her exiting Madison Square Garden hand in hand with Ines Cantor Freedom, the towering NBA center and outspoken critic of authoritarian regimes. Social media melted down. Old money meets modern protest. Pundits predicted disaster. Arianna saw dialogue. Dinner at her apartment meant grilled salmon beside a laptop streaming congressional hearings on human rights sanctions. She attended his charity basketball clinics. He accompanied her to equestrian galas previously devoid of 6'11" activists. Whatever the fate of their relationship, the union symbolized Arianna's disregard for old money echo chambers and her knack for turning personal choices into public seminars on cross-cultural empathy. Philanthropy, meanwhile, matured from family obligation into intellectual obsession. As a trustee of the David Rockefeller Fund, Arianna helped pivot millions toward intersectional climate work, projects addressing carbon drawdown alongside racial equity and indigenous stewardship. She championed a grant to finance electric ferry prototypes servicing tribal communities in the Pacific Northwest, and argued for an artist-in-residence program within the Sierra Club to fuse aesthetics with ecological advocacy. When colleagues expressed sticker shock at a multi-million-dollar commitment to prison abolition think tanks, she quoted her grandfather, "If necessity is the mother of invention, moral urgency is its fuel." In May 2018, Christie's auctioned her grandfather's personal art trove for $835 million, still the largest single-owner sale on record. Arianna coordinated a multi-layered giving plan, funneling proceeds into endowments for small arts institutions teetering on pandemic precipices, years before COVID-19 would actually test museums worldwide. The initiative featured sliding scale governance requiring recipient boards to add community representatives within 12 months. Conservative cousins raised eyebrows. Arianna countered that democratizing culture was not a risk, but a remedy against irrelevance. By the early 2000s and 20s, her social media strategy had evolved into an anthropology experiment. Instagram grids alternated between high-gloss editorial shoots and unfiltered barn selfies where hay clung to her cashmere sweater. Captions offered micro-lessons. A photo of her cleaning Galileo's hooves linked followers to a deep dive on equine biomechanics. A snapshot of a thrifted 1950s Balenciaga coat included pointers on choosing vintage over fast fashion. Her DMs filled with teenagers asking how to launch sustainable brands without trust funds. Arianna responded with 3-paragraph guides and occasional video chat mentorship sessions, saying, "Access scales faster than money if you share hard-won shortcuts." Signing with the Maryland agency in 2021 supercharged her global reach. Fashion Week became a movable feast of photo calls, backstage pep talks, and front-row seatings where she gleefully nerded out over seam allowances while seatmates speculated about Bitcoin dips. She walked one charity runway show in Milan wearing a tuxedo-inspired riding habit, raising €2 million for Afghan women's education in a single evening. Industry insiders marveled at her calculus: monetize visibility to fuel invisible deeds. Never satisfied with 2 lanes when 6 beckon, Arianna announced pre-production on a documentary series tracking 5 artisan families battling supply chain commodification. Cameras would follow Burkinabe bronze casters, Scottish cashmere spinners, Japanese indigo dyers, Colombian mochila weavers, and a Detroit-based sneaker restoration collective. Each story braided by Arianna's narration about lineage, labor, and latent power structures. Several networks vied for rights. She selected a partnership that guaranteed profit sharing with profiled artists. When asked if the show would double as promotional content for her own label, she shrugged. If respecting craft sells a few extra bags, so be it. But if it decolonizes at least one viewer's idea of luxury, mission accomplished. Her critics never vanished. They simply updated their angles. Some called her brand of conscious capitalism naive. Others accused her of green glossing ancestral sins. Arianna welcomed the scrutiny, inviting detractors to quarterly stakeholder Q&A's livestream from her studio. She published full audit reports of her company's carbon footprint, down to the kilowatt hours consumed by office laptops. When trolls questioned the ethics of using exotic leathers, she suspended ostrich production until third-party certification could prove regenerative sourcing. The pause cost her 6 high-margin SKUs and earned a flood of goodwill that spreadsheets cannot quantify but social capital can. Late 2023 found Arianna in Miami during Art Basel Week, not prowling VIP vernissage corridors, but kneeling in sand dunes north of the city, helping restore coastal vegetation ravaged by hurricane surge. Beside her knelt 25 art students flown in on scholarships funded by Rockefeller Capital. Between shoveling sea oats, they debated NFTs, coral bleaching, and the politics of museum board appointments. Arianna, ponytail frizzing in humidity, scribbled phrases for a future speech. Legacy must photosynthesize, rooted yet converting new light into usable energy. Her daily planner became a mosaic of contradictory coordinates: Sotheby's Gala, red-eye flight to a Kenyan reforestation site, board meeting Zoom from a barn tack room, product development call during layover in Doha, silent meditation retreat in Massachusetts farmland, owned by cousins. She thrived on the oscillation, calling it her heartbeat of extremes: pause, thrust, reflect, act. The pause arrived unexpectedly on a brisk February morning when Galileo stumbled exiting his trailer. Vets diagnosed a tendon injury requiring months of stall rest. Arianna cleared her calendar, moved a desk into the barn, and spent dawn till dusk beside her restless partner, massaging liniment into swelling and dictating grant proposals between soft knickers. Barn staff watched her trade stilettos for muck boots without missing a beat. The sabbatical crystallized a revelation. High stakes make lousy companions if they crush the quiet. Cue the next pivot. In 2025, Arianna launched the Rockefeller Resonance Initiative, a fellowship pairing young social entrepreneurs with seasoned artisans to co-design products solving community-specific challenges: solar-powered irrigation backpacks, low EMF headsets for neurodivergent students, biodegradable horse bandage wraps. Fellows receive seed grants, mentorship, and global shelf space through Arianna's retail partners. First-year alumni landed patents, procurement contracts with NGOs, and something rarer, networks unbound by nepotism. Back in New York, the Empire State Building lit its Spire Rockefeller Emerald when Arianna accepted the United Nations Equitable Innovation Award. Her father in attendance, eyes watery behind horn-rimmed glasses reminiscent of David Sr.'s. The ceremony briefly turned Arianna into the story's object rather than its narrator, and she managed discomfort by dedicating the honor to everyone who ever felt their last name, or lack of one, was a foregone conclusion. Cameras flashed. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond Midtown. Arianna glanced up as though listening for a newborn's cry echoing through time. Nightfall found her walking alone along the High Line, the city's neon heartbeat pulsing beneath her boots. Phone notifications buzzed. A group text from cousins dissecting quarter-end earnings, a selfie from Ines at a human rights summit. A reminder that her next runway appearance required a 6 a.m. call time. Arianna pocketed the device and leaned against a rail overlooking traffic, blurring taillights weaving futures no dynasty could fully script. She inhaled cold air mixed with distant food truck spices and considered the complexity of inheritance. Money, yes, but also memory, momentum, and mistakes ready to be rewritten.